Right, guys, welcome to episode 10 of the greatest wrestling tournament ever. We're into the second round now, and we've actually gone for a very similar time frame to the previous match. It's 1999 WCW. We went from what was billed as one of the greatest matches ever in Sting versus Goldberg, which I think it's fair to say wasn't one of the greatest matches ever. Is that a fair description, would you say, Lee?
I think that's a very fair description.
Yeah, was it
Yeah,
a bit weak? Was that accurate?
it's one of them when it's got a label like that, then you're expecting great things, aren't you? It was all right.
Did you actually watch the greatest wrestling match ever between Randy Orton and Edge properly last year, like all the way through with no spoilers?
Yeah,
Was it
yeah,
pretty good? Was it good? Was it?
it was good fun. Yeah, I just didn't like the title of it.
Yeah.
Didn't like that they could predetermine the greatest match ever.
I just flicked through it as I often do with pay-per-views, and then when I heard afterwards, actually it was really good. I then tried to watch it, but I got a bit tired of it, to be honest. Now, this is being filmed the day after WrestleMania. Now, I've noticed this WrestleMania's got a number again. For years, WrestleMania has not had a number. And this one's got a number again. It's WrestleMania 37, so I don't know quite what that is. But you're not going to be watching WrestleMania now for a few days, are you? Because Harry's ruined it for you, hasn't he?
Yeah, Harry's decided we need to go back and watch Fastlane before we can even
Oh.
consider watching WrestleMania.
I thought you two might be staying up to watch it because he's watched at least one, hasn't he, when he's been on half term, whatever it was, and therefore can go to bed late and have a bit of a lie-in. I thought you guys might watch it live,
Yeah, we've done 2 live,
but
and
not WrestleMania.
no, it wasn't even thrown out there as a possibility.
So Harry was up for watching something in the Thunderdome live, but he wasn't up for watching 20-odd thousand fans at WrestleMania live.
I think he forgot, to be honest. We've not been on it that much. It's well, as you can see, like I say, we've not even seen Fastlane yet, so we've fallen behind.
I won't bother, have you? Just go straight to it. Main event of night one is good. Bianca Belair, who I know you're a fan of, versus Sasha Banks. Good match that. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but I enjoyed it.
No, forward to that.
Cool, right. So Super Bowl 9 from February the 21st, 1999. My friend's birthday, that is. Completely irrelevant. We're on the chapter of Roddy Piper versus Scott Hall. I'm not holding up much hope for this being a particularly good match either, but at least by the looks of it, it's relatively short. It's 1 hour 58, 24 in to the pay-per-view. Pressing play in 3, 2, 1, go. Have you watched any of the Hall of Fame? Because Scott Hall, as part of the NWO, has been inducted into the Hall of Fame this last week. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he looks old. He looks old, really old. Kevin Nash still looks
How old
pretty
is
cool. I would guess. Let me think. He's got to be 60 now. I'd say he's about 20 years older than us. It's got to be 60. But Kevin Nash is the same age, and Nash looks well. Hogan's older, and fair enough. I know he's gimmicked up. He's got the beach blonde hair. He's got the bandana. He's got the shades and all that. But he generally looks all right. Sean Waltman, as a fourth member of the NWO, looks pretty good, but then I'm fairly sure Waltman's still only about 46 or 47 because he was so much younger than the rest of them at the time. I have a feeling he was
Is that the
21.
1, 2, 3 kid?
Yeah, I'm fairly sure he was 21 when he debuted in WWE, which would put him at 49 now, I believe. So, right, actually, this is. Have I got the mistake here, or is this someone accompanying one of them? This is Disco Inferno
Who's
coming
that?
out. It was Disco Inferno. You've not heard of Disco Inferno? Obviously
I
not.
know the song.
Yeah. Well, you fair enough. You'd probably get more enjoyment out of that than the wrestler. I remember Disco Inferno from watching WCW in the late '90s. He was inoffensive. Didn't really do anything particularly outrageously bad, but I can't remember anything that he did remotely good either. So I presume he'll be part of NWO here. I'm guessing because it looks like Scott Hall's about to come out now. I'm fairly sure, since we're both seeing Disco Inferno, we can't have both made the same mistake and put on the wrong chapter. So at this moment, Scott Hall is part of
Yeah,
NWO Hollywood. I don't know if you know that the original
it's just
NWO
on the screen in the background.
is coming now. He's coming. I don't know if you know, but the original NWO that debuted in summer of '96 ended up splintering off into 2 separate factions. You had NWO Hollywood, led by Hogan, of course, versus NWO Wolfpack. Now, actually, looking at the colours there, the red and black, Hall's in NWO Wolfpack, not in NWO Hollywood. Just someone clearly in the crowd was holding up a sign to show their preferred version of the NWO.
So obviously, it's Scott Hall here, but is he still kind of doing the whole Cuban thing and with the
Not
accent and everything?
not Cuban and not really the accent, but a lot of other similarities to the Razor Ramon character. When he first came on to WCW TV, having been Razor Ramon, when he returned to WCW, he did the AEO and a lot of the similarities. I think by this, probably not even by this point, probably by late '96, it's very much just Scott Hall talking in his fairly normal but somewhat exaggerated for wrestling voice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've got Disco Inferno clearly accompanying Scott Hall to ringside, getting ready for Roddy Piper. Now, this is the only match we could find between them that was a singles match, and I believe it's for the US title. There we go. Piper's coming out now, sporting the US title. Now, I mean, he's pretty old now, Piper, there, isn't he? He looks a bit too old to be a champion to me. What's
How
Piper
old
going
will
to
he be
be?
there? 50-ish?
I don't think he quite will be, to be honest. So let's say he's a similar age to Hogan. I'd have to double check that. In '99, that would put him at 46, 7. He might be a little bit older than Hogan. I think Flair will have turned 50 this year, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I'm going to put him at late 40s. So similar age to
So
X
50.
Pac. Yeah. He looks good with the belt, though. I'll give him that. He's one that didn't win many titles, Piper. He obviously won the Intercontinental title in 1992, won the US title here, and as far as I know, that's possibly the extent of it for him.
Yeah.
You got any interesting quiz questions for me, Lee?
Yeah.
Go on, hit me
What
up.
was Scott Hall's finish called WCW?
Outsider's Edge.
Correct.
Yeah, so obviously it was the Razor's Edge, just renamed for the Outsiders because when Hall and Nash first came in, they were referred to as the Outsiders because they were coming from the outside. They then became part of NWO with Hogan and others later on, but even then, Hall and Nash were considered to be the Outsiders. That was their tag name. So when they tagged up and they won the tag titles, they were billed as the Outsiders as part of the NWO.
I think they fought in this same event, didn't they, as the Outsiders?
They may well have done. I'm not seeing. One thing that we both did just notice, actually, independently, is when we were just flicking through the chapters to get to this. Kurt Hennig's in a match earlier on in the night, and he looks absolutely stacked, doesn't he? He looks massive.
Just roided up to the max.
Well, I was just about to say exactly the same thing. I think it's a fairly common thing with guys there who are past their prime athletically. They can't perform to the same level. So, I mean, look at Randy Savage in 1999. Randy Savage in '99 had by far the most muscle mass he ever had, even compared to 12,
Yeah.
15 years younger, which you're not getting there without a bit of extra assistance, are you?
Yeah, I remember when Randy Savage was in that Spider-Man movie, wasn't he?
Well, I was
And
just
he was
about to mention
huge.
that. I was literally just about to mention that because only last Thursday night, my two older sons wanted to watch that, and we watched it. And as you correctly said there, Randy Savage plays Bonesaw McGraw, and he's massive in
That's
that,
it.
isn't
he? Huge.
What are your thoughts on
Who did Roddy Piper? Who did Roddy Piper fight at WrestleMania 3?
WrestleMania 3? Would have been adorable Adrian Adonis. Put him to sleep with a sleeper. Brutus Beefcake comes out afterwards, shaves his head, beginning the barber gimmick that he kept for the next few years. I think, did Piper then essentially retire after that and was gone for a good few years, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, I don't think when did he come back?
So WrestleMania 3 would have been 87. I think he was gone till around 90-ish, maybe something like that. I think he was very much considered his retirement match. I believe he intended to retire and then came back. He obviously went off to do filming. I think that's when he did.
Yeah, he didn't fight in any of the events in 1990. I think it might have been 91 when he came back.
Right, yeah, it's gone a long time there. Hall looks a bit rough there, actually. This is probably Hall at his peak alcoholic phase as well. I remember in late '98, Hall and Nash had a match at, I want to say Halloween Havoc '98, where the story of the match is Hall's alcoholism. He comes in clearly pretending to be drunk as part of the storyline, but it's based off the fact that he is a raging alcoholic. Because I think that's a confirmed way to treat alcoholics, isn't it? Mock them on national TV. I think that helps them,
I
doesn't
believe
it?
so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where
Yeah.
other alcoholics go wrong. They try and get counselling and things like that. They need to be sent out on national TV and be mocked because that worked because it only took another 15 years before Hall stopped drinking after that.
I always love the term raging as well, whenever to any of the alcoholics. It's kind of like it's quite an overt, quite out there alcoholic. It's a raging alcoholic.
Well, randomly, I've just remembered. Now, I haven't heard this phrase used for decades, thankfully, because obviously it's not a nice way to put it. But people used to say that someone was a raging homosexual, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Again,
Yeah.
along the same lines, it's like, why? If anything, they're quite happy about it, aren't they? They don't seem particularly annoyed.
Yeah. Oh no, I always thought raging was kind of like the really sort of out there and throw it around everywhere. So they're not just a homosexual; they're raging, but the same for anything. Alcoholic.
I suppose,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. But then you wouldn't say that of something else, would you? Like he's a raging philanthropist because he helps people, financially, or is a it's generally given a negative context, isn't
Horrible.
it? I think it's only used by people who consider that thing to be negative, isn't it?
To be negative, and then it's kind of negative to the max. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott Hall's son was briefly a member of the Bullet Club.
Cody.
What's his name?
Cody Hall.
Is that easy?
I gave you the answer before you finished the question. Take that. Yeah, he seemed to have a lot of potential. Cody Hall did. He's tall like his old man. From what I understood, he seemed to be an all right worker, but obviously didn't quite manage to put it together because it's been a good decade now that he's been on the scene, and the furthest he got was part of the Bullet Club in New Japan. So you kind of assume that's been the ceiling of his career.
I don't know if you're watching any of this, but it was pretty terrible.
Oh yeah, they're just punching and kicking. Yeah. Funnily enough, though, Hall took longer to really get over than you might expect. He seemed to come out of nowhere as Razor Ramon in '92, but he'd been the Diamond Stud in WCW directly before that as a bit of a flop. Prior to that, a few years earlier, he'd been in AWA, and he had done all right for himself. But to say then how over he was as Razor Ramon, and to say how good he was in that particular role, I mean, if anything, Hall's got a very short window of actually being good there, hasn't he? He's got WrestleMania 10 in March '94 through to SummerSlam '95, basically the two ladder matches he had with Shawn Michaels and a few others in between, where he's actually any good. Anything outside of that window is.
Yeah, I was going to say though, but I mean, obviously, like you say, short-lived, but inarguably one of, if not the greatest match of all time.
I remember reading at the time something about Hall and Nash and about how it's not surprising that they made it as alongside Shawn Michaels rather than being alongside DDP, because they were both associated with DDP in WCW prior to coming to WWF. Now, that was DDP before he actually became very successful himself. A few years later, he was successful and a world champion, but you can see how being a part of the diamond mine in 1992 versus being a bodyguard for an opponent of Shawn Michaels isn't going to quite give you the same level of progression, is it?
Yeah, it's a great point.
Now, I remember Piper coming back to
WCW.
Oh, go on, hit me up.
Go on, which WCW pay-per-view did Hall tase Goldberg, allowing Kevin Nash to end his undefeated streak?
Starrcade '98, about 2 months before this. They're considered using a what's it called, where they shoot out it's not a taser, it's very similar to a taser where it shoots out the thing and it attaches to people and it zaps them. They instead that was it.
That's a taser, isn't it?
Yeah, no, they didn't use a taser. They used a cattle prod. They were going to use a taser, but they used the cattle prod because obviously that's easier to gimmick. A cattle prod, you can just have either a real cattle prod turned off or some sort of fake one that you poke him with. I can't remember if there's some sort of sound effect played, but obviously the idea was it had given him a massive electric shock, and then he turned around to take the jackknife powerbomb to end the streak.
The Mounties used to have a cattle prod.
Got the old abdominal stretch spot there where the other person's pulling on the hands. That's one of those, and it just about works with the abdominal stretch. But no end of times, particularly probably earlier than this, like late 80s, early 90s, you see someone grabbing the ropes or grabbing someone else's hand for leverage on what is essentially a submission move, but in a way that doesn't really help. Like I remember seeing people putting someone in a Boston Crab and then reaching forward and grabbing onto the ropes. And I'm like, you're going the opposite direction to what it's.
Yeah, you're helping the guy out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're putting less pressure on the bottom of the back.
even the abdominal stretch. I mean, I get
Awesome.
that one a little bit more. The idea is that you're pulling them back upright a little bit more, but Disco Inferno reaching in and pulling on Scott Hall's hand there didn't really look like it made it any more painful for Roddy Piper as the receiver.
No.
He's got him in the sleeper now. He's fading. He's fading. Did Piper ever beat anyone with a
Piper,
sleeper particularly?
it's very rare. I mean, apart from Brutus, there weren't many wrestlers who used not to see win matches with a sleeper hold.
Maybe $1 Million
Ted
Man.
DiBiase's $1 Million Dream.
Yeah.
They used to come up a lot.
Always confused me how the $1 Million Dream was a sleeper hold, but the Cobra Clutch by Sergeant Slaughter, which was the exact same move, was a submission move. Oh, there we go. It's over. It's over. Hall just pulled his legs out from under him, pinned him with his feet on the ropes. Hall winning the US title there.
It makes more sense as a submission move to me.
Yeah.
It looks more like a submission move.
Maybe they just
because it's kind of like I know how to put it on. I just can't demonstrate it.
For anyone listening, Lee's demoing himself in the $1 Million Dream at the moment. Now, if you hear snoring in a second, that's because Lee's just put himself to sleep with a modified, self-applied $1 Million Dream. Maybe it was a repositioning of the fingers or something. I don't know. Right, so yeah, Piper's just lost the title to Hall there. So that means Hall obviously is both an Intercontinental and US champion, like Piper is there. He does look rough there.
Yeah, more importantly than that.
Go on.
More importantly than that.
Yeah.
He's through to the semi-finals.
Oh, he is. He is. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? Do you think all those years ago he was more concerned about potentially getting through to the semi-finals of a podcast in 22 years? You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
I think if he was watching this now, he'd be up there with his greatest achievements, especially after that match. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would cheer him up. He looked a little bit sad at the Hall of Fame the other night. I think if he's listening to this podcast, and hopefully he is, then it will have cheered him up that he's got through to the next round. Right, speaking of next round, we obviously need an opponent for him. Now, we drew up some brackets for this, didn't we? So what was the next quarter-final that we decided on?
Well, we'll stick to the brackets.
Yeah, we've got to stick to the brackets. This is a legit tournament, Lee. We're not going to mess about with it.
They'll be the winner of Roman Reigns and Chris Jericho.
Okay, that's a slightly random one, isn't it? So I can't actually remember who wins that. I presume it's Roman Reigns. So does that mean we're stuck with Roman Reigns versus Scott Hall? We'll figure out anyway what happens in the next round. You got any last few quiz questions for me? That was obviously a very short match, so you may have got some more.
Was through. Piper returned to WrestleMania 5 to host Piper's Pit. Who was his celebrity guest?
Morton Downey Jr.
Correct.
Wow, look at that from nowhere. That was a good one, that was, wasn't it?
Who did Scott Hall defeat in his first WWE match after WCW was bought by Vince McMahon?
Right, so, okay. This is going to be February or March of 2002. Is it a singles match?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a singles match and Hall wins. So he comes in. They definitely have a big 3-on-2, Hall, Hogan and Nash versus Austin and The Rock. Then Hall faces Austin at WrestleMania but loses. Pass.
Spike Dudley.
Okay, I wouldn't have guessed that. Yeah, fair enough.
Who did Roddy Piper defeat to win the Intercontinental Championship at Royal Rumble 1992?
The Mountie.
Correct.
It only beat Brett for it 2 days early because Brett supposedly had the flu, which my understanding of that is that's a gimmicked flu as an excuse for him to drop the belt in order to pass it on to Piper in order to set up the WrestleMania match.
What faction was Scott Hall a member of while wrestling for New Japan Pro Wrestling?
Not the Bullet Club?
Team 2000.
Team 2000? I've never heard of that. I've heard of Techno Team 2000. Have you heard of Techno Team 2000?
No.
They were a short-lived tag team in WWF in, I want to say, 95. It was Eric Watts, formerly of WCW, the son of former Booker cowboy Bill Watts, and Chad somebody. I think that was his only thing that people might vaguely remember. That came out in these futuristic outfits and lasted a couple of weeks.
There you go. 2 more. Who did Roddy Piper replace on a temporary basis as WWE president in 1996?
Gorilla Monsoon after Vader squashed him night after the Royal Rumble.
Well done. And which WWE superstar did Roddy Piper manage in 2003?
Ooh, Zack Ryder?
No.
No, Zack.
Sean O'Hare.
Oh, right. I was actually meaning the one-legged guy, which wasn't Zack Ryder. It was Zack something else. But yeah, Sean O'Hare. Yeah, I remember that. Ish, vaguely. That was when Hogan was Mr. America as well. It was Hogan with a mask on, still calling everyone brother, but with a mask on, pretending to be somebody else. It's worth a watch. It's quite funny. Have you ever seen the lie detector test that Mr. America gets Vince McMahon to do? No? So Hogan is in a mask pretending to be Mr. America. It's really obviously him because I think he's been sacked or fired in storyline at that point. Vince says that he wants Mr. America to take a lie detector test, which he does and passes. So Vince says, "Are you Hulk Hogan?" And he goes, "No, brother." Ting, passes. And Vince, after several of these, thinks it must be faulty, and to demo its faultiness, puts it on himself. And I can't remember the exact questions, but as you can imagine, they are funny when he's asked a question and denies it, but it turns out it's true. I mean, it's not this, but it's something like, "Have you ever slept with your cousin?" "No, of course not." That kind of thing. Have a watch.
Check it out.
Get it on YouTube. Right, guys, so next week, Roman Reigns versus Chris Jericho. As always, if you've been watching this, feel free to comment either on the website itself, I think you can comment on there, or on social media. Again, we're fairly steady on listening figures, so I'm fairly sure it's some people week in, week out who are, at least to a sufficient degree, enjoying this. I mean, they're downloading it. You can't hate it too much if you're still downloading it, can you? Surely.
Absolutely.
I mean, it might be me, my mum, you, your mum. My mum's friend.
Scott Hall.
Scott Hall,
Scott Hall.
I've pointed out to Izzy that Scott Hall is like the combined name of her dad and stepdad because her dad's called Scott. My surname's obviously Hall. Yeah. Awesome. Right. Nice one. See you next week, guys.